Good evening. This meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of August 2nd, 2023 will come to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Lori.
Chairman Richardson,
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Here.
Secretary Grant,
Here.
Member Moscoso, here, Member Garrod,
Here.
Member Faison,
Here.
Member Perez,
Here.
Alternate Member Childs,
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers, School Board Member Gilbert.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Next item is approval of the minutes of July 19th.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
in regard to the minutes, I was going to make a correction, if I remember this correctly, on the draft minutes on reports regarding, I didn't get that section to tell you which it's referenced to, but it's in the discussion on reports about the Thousand Friends of Florida. And what I was going to mention is that I didn't attend a conference when I made the motion. I mentioned it was a webinar available. So if I could recommend the minutes be inclusive of a condition that would be changed to recognize that it was Thousand Friends of Florida organization provides a webinar.
What page is that on?
Page 9 of 140 of your agenda. I'm sorry, I looked at
Okay. Any other additions or corrections to make the minutes? Anyone care to make a motion?
I move to approve with the change.
Any, a second?
Second.
Seconded by Member Perez. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garrod,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Next item is planned unit development minimum living standards. Why don't we take that up at the last of the business section of the agenda? And next will be right-of-way number 1-2023 Broad Street.
Before we jump into that item, I'd like to introduce the city's new hire. Sue Williams has been hired as the CRA planner for the city of Titusville, and she's going to present this first item.
Good evening. The background, the applicant is requesting to vacate a public right-of-way that is located on Broad Street, west of South Lemon Avenue and east of the FEC Railway. The right-of-way contains 15,850 square feet and measures approximately 100 feet wide and 159 feet in length. The owners own both sides of the requested right-of-way vacation. This request allows the 100-foot wide right-of-way to be vacated in order for a single-family site plan to be developed on the combined properties. The following provides review criteria and staff's findings. Consistency with the comprehensive plan. The proposed vacation is consistent with the comprehensive plan and more specifically with the following policy. The transportation element TE policy 1.6.2. The vacate request will not create a landlocked lot provided that the two parcels to the north under common ownership are unified with a unity of title. The applicant has no obligation to the condition, no objection to the condition requiring a unity of title for the two north properties. The staff does not anticipate the use of the subject right-of-way for future connection to a future transit, pedestrian, or vehicular means of transportation. The subject right-of-way dead ends into the Florida East Coast Railway right-of-way. Future connection to the west is not anticipated due to the railway restrictions. The right-of-way is the benefit of the public future needs and environmental impacts. The right-of-way is a dead-end segment of Broad Street. There does not appear to be a public purpose for vehicular or pedestrian access, and there are no environmental impacts to vacating the right-of-way. The Water Resources Department has no objection, provided there is a condition of approval for the existing portion of the sanitary sewer to manhole 15-55 shall be considered abandoned, and no future connections to this portion of the sanitary sewer utility shall be made. The right-of-way does not provide access to a publicly accessible body of water. Florida City Gas, no objection. Florida Power and Light, no objection. Spectrum, no objection. The staff recommendation, based on the above findings, the staff has no objection to the request to vacate a portion of Broad Street with the following conditions. Number one, the existing portion of the sanitary sewer to manhole 15-55 shall be considered abandoned, and no future connections to this portion of the sanitary sewer utility shall be made. Number two, an easement of 30 feet by 60 feet will be needed for the city of Titusville for maintenance of stormwater structures. The easement shall be 30 feet from curb going west and 60 feet north and south, centered on the curb ramp. Condition 3, a unity of title is needed for the two parcels abutting the right-of-way requested to be vacated to the north, tax ID numbers 2200359 and 2200360, prior to vacating to ensure the western property is not landlocked. The applicant indicated no objection to this unification of title. Condition 4, the cross-access and maintenance easements are provided over all existing city-owned utilities, Florida Power and Light, AT&T, Spectrum, and Florida City Gas facilities in the area to be vacated. Number 5, in the event that compliance with these conditions set forth herein is not achieved within 180 days of the date of approval of the vacation, this resolution shall become null and void. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Any questions of the staff? Yes, Member Garrett.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and in respect to the package we have, there's a drawing that's provided, a photocopy of the boundary survey, and when you see the recommendation from Public Works regarding the 30-foot by 60-foot easement, they reference it being measured from the curb running west. And what I noticed was in the drawing that's provided, the curbing appears to be within the right-of-way, and that measurement point as a curb goes is something that's subject to changes, where in a right-of-way boundary or even a vacated right-of-way boundary wouldn't be. I would suggest possibly having Public Works rework the language of which they're asking for the easement to be described so that it would be referencing from the right-of-way if it's a western boundary of the right-of-way of Lemon Street or the coterminous boundary with the property from that point as opposed to referencing it from the back of curb. And the 60 feet, I think I understand. I drove by and looked at the site, and there's two inlets that are in the old curbing, and that's what it appears they want to encompass in the easement for maintenance purposes. My only note would be just to relook at the language used for describing the 30 feet west of the curb to be 30 feet west of the right-of-way line or the boundary of the property, either way.
Any other questions of the staff?
Yes, I was just curious, is there a fee that the applicant has to pay, like an administrative fee? I was looking at like what Orange County does and different counties around us, and for something like this, there's like $1,000 fee. Is that something that we require?
This came, I believe there is. This came in before I started, so I'm going to segue over to Eddie on this one.
Thank you. Sure. Yes, there is an application fee that the applicant pays. It's approximately, I'm not sure if it's $1,500, but there's a substantial application fee for this request.
Okay, great. And is the applicant here tonight
Yes.
to ask questions? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions of the staff? Okay, I'll open the public hearing first, and we'll hear from the applicant.
Can you hit the mic? Thanks. We're good.
Okay, you're good. Okay. A couple things. First, in your agenda packet, I'd like you to turn to page 36 on your agenda packet, because I'm going to reference that photo several times. As staff indicated, the applicant, my client, owns both sides of the right-of-way on from Lemon Street all the way back to Railroad Track. Okay, which makes it nice. if you look at that photo, what's important to know is that it dead ends at the railroad track. But if you look on the other side of the railroad track, that's the Rinker site. It's already been vacated. There's no way to extend Broad Street or any pedestrian path or anything across that railroad track because it would go, you'd have to do eminent domain to take it from Rinker. The other thing is getting a crossing on a railroad track is extremely hard to do. Typically in the past, when the city wanted a crossing, they had to get rid of a crossing to do a new crossing because the railroad company wants to minimize safety and crossings where accidents more than likely could happen. So they tried to limit those things. This one serves no purpose. So it's really a no-brainer why you'd want to vacate this. We agree with all the conditions, and I'd like to go over the easement a little bit. It's my understanding the intent of the easement, if you look at this photograph, at the very edge of where the apron stops, there's two drainage structures sitting there, okay? That drains portion of Lemon Street. And what Public Works wants is an easement placed over that area to assure that they always have access, that they can maintain that stormwater system. Broad Street's 100 feet wide, which is not a typical right-of-way in Titusville is 50 feet. But the road is only, with those drainage structures, they only need 60 feet, okay? And 30 feet back. So that's what they're asking. It's my understanding that the center of the 60 feet is center of Broad Street and goes 30 feet north, 30 feet south, and 30 feet west, okay? And I don't have a problem if Public Works needs to clarify that, that's great. So I think everything's lined up here. It's really one of the easier right-of-way vacations that you could ask for because of the railroad track and it leads to nowhere. There's really no possibility of any future connection. So I'd appreciate your support tonight. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer it.
Any more questions? Okay.
So I moved over from Orlando, and I love to use the Cross Seminole Trail. I used to ride it a lot. So when I first moved to Titusville, I went to, there's a trail right there. I think it's called the Florida East Central Rail Trail. Mm-hmm. It's really close to Broad Street. And so the trailhead is on Canaveral Avenue, which is, you have Broad Street here and Canaveral Avenue is here. But there's no parking right here for that trailhead. So I drove with my bike looking for a place to park. And when I drove by today, there's the Napa that was right there. So I was able to park there. But I see that it's not going anywhere, but would it be, I don't even know if this is possible, just throwing it out. There is no parking for that trailhead, and that is the beginning of the trail. Is there a deal that the city could come up with where we would be provided with parking if we vacate this land? Would that be something that we could possibly discuss or even be possible?
Well, one is, once it's vacated, it's private. They're trying to do a commercial project there is what they're trying to do. The trail that you're speaking of goes down Main Street, and I'm going by memory now, or maybe it's Tropic to Main, but it's over there. And the reason why it goes the path it goes right now is because DOT did not want to take it down to Broad Street and encourage bicycles going down Broad Street where there's no light at US 1. So the trails went down where it went because there were lights there. I would have loved to have it on Broad Street, okay, because it was broad, okay? It made sense to me, but without having the lights there, one of the biggest threats and one of the big standards that DOT is trying to minimize is death to pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's why they felt it was really more important to have the crossings for bicycles and trails where they are. The other part for the biking, for the parking was at the Julia Street. There was at one time a bike store in the city-owned building there across from the theater in the center. And that's really where the downtown parking is, okay? Broad Street will have parking up and down it. Now, if the city wanted to restripe that part of Broad Street that's not being vacated between Lemon and Pine, that makes some sense, okay, to do that. I just don't know that you want to encourage too many bicyclists going down Broad Street, crossing US 1 where there is no light.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking when I got on at Canaveral Avenue, which is Broad Street Canaveral, where it starts, if you look up the map, that's where it starts. You go over Garden Street. And so you actually have that overpass.
Right.
And so I just think it's something for us to consider, that there is a need for parking in that area for that bike trail. So I just wanted to put that out there as something to consider.
You know, I can't speak for my client, whether they're willing to share parking or anything like that, but my gut instinct tells me that this site is not that big, that the parking to meet the demand for whatever use they end up putting there would be utilized for that development.
So your client's intent is to make this a commercial developable lot.
Yeah, they're going to take the two lots that need to be the unity of title, because if, you know, once you vacate the Broad Street, it becomes landlocked, and you can't do that in the state of Florida. So that, and then lot 1 that's in that photo, and the right-of-way is being vacated, that'll end up being one development.
Mr. Grant, Secretary Grant.
No, okay. Just for the city, how many conditions are there? 5 or 3?
There are 5 if you got the attachment that you sent out.
Okay.
That is
that
correct.
under Agenda Star?
Yeah, I do. I have
No,
more
it's on
copies.
page 18. I was wondering why.
I got it.
No, I was wondering why one page had 3 conditions and another page had 5.
So just to clarify, the original report, when the agenda was published,
Yeah.
had 3 conditions, and
Right.
staff has since updated the report to include 5 total conditions.
Okay, all right. So those are the conditions that's needed for approval.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I ask the applicant, since you're the engineer of record on this one,
I'm sorry?
you're the representative of the engineer of record for the applicant?
I am.
So you understood my question regarding the right-of-way as opposed to the curbing that's illustrated in the.
Yeah, I think the intent is that the right-of-way line, if you look at the sketch on page, I think it's 39 of your agenda.
Yeah, in the survey, it shows
Or
the
page-
curbing inside the right.
Page 38 is the sketch of the right-of-way vacation. The intent is from that property line that goes across that you're vacating portion, 30 feet back from that line.
I fully understand that.
Okay.
The issue I had is that the survey that's included, we had a photocopy of, illustrates the curbing inside the right-of-way. So your 30 feet becomes measured from something that's not the.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the intent. I really,
Right,
I think the intent was from that right-of-way line.
And you're okay with clarifying it to be
Yes.
measured from the right-of-way?
I have no problem if the Public Works need to clarify that. I have no problem.
Thank you.
I mean, worst case is going to be from the line, best case, it's in our favor, it goes out to the curb.
It's exactly right.
Okay.
It's just a matter of clarifying the
Okay.
point of origin. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Rice? Thank you. Oh,
Mr. Rice, could you clarify a little bit more about what type of project is going to go?
Right now, they're in negotiation, and I asked if I could disclose that, and they said no.
Okay. All right. I've got further commentary on the bike path issue, but perhaps this is not the time, or?
But it will be good for downtown.
any other questions? Thank you. Anyone else? Call the cards, please. Lori.
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnson, professional engineer. I've been in that area a number of times. And I see that it would be a boon to the community so that it'll be mowed and it'll be cleaned up. Because right now, it can accumulate trash and so forth, and that's what it has. It's been a trash area. In fact, the house that was near there, they just tore it down. So that would be an improvement to have that. I also want to mention to you, especially if you look at the drawing, is that Florida East Coast Railroad is designated from the past as DeSoto Avenue. And of course, that's someone who was guilty of genocide and so forth. So it's interesting is that the city, I know, would not put up with that kind of a name at this time. So thank you. That's all.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Come back to the commission. The public hearing is closed. Any other questions of the staff or anyone care to make a motion? Everybody's jumping at once. Mr. Garrard.
Owing to my question, I'll make the motion that we recommend approval of the vacation right-of-way, subject to clarifying the point of the beginning of the easement running west 30 feet.
Member Faison.
I second.
Okay. Member Rogers.
I apologize, I was reminded the other 5 conditions on the approval.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I
Member
just
Rogers.
had further commentary on some reservations regarding that, but I'm sorry, I'm a bit lost. I've been out of the loop for a little while, just coming back. But just regarding the bike path issue, is this a time for that, or?
Right now, a motion is on the table, so the only discussion should be on whether or not this motion should be amended or voted upon.
I think the bike path, we may take up the end of the agenda. It doesn't really pertain to this issue right here.
Well, I sort of thought it did because I thought the bike path should actually go through this particular right-of-way.
Well, it doesn't end there. It ends a couple blocks over. And the reason, and remember, I call him Member Rice, he used to be, Mr. Rice discussed it, that with the traffic signals was put on Main Street.
I understand Mr. Rice's point, and I think it's an excellent one, and I did not know that that's why it ran down Main Street. But to Member Mocoso's point, there's a massive parking. As a cyclist myself, I've been through there many times, and there's massive parking at the Wells Fargo building and along the street at Spaceview Park. And I believe that Mr. Rice went immediately to that particular issue about not having a throughway there because it's the Achilles heel of this proposal. That in fact, the logical thing for the current bike path to do is probably for the city to use some form of eminent domain to take a little tiny strip of the property where it lands at the head of Canaveral Avenue and go across the railroad tracks there through this right-of-way and straight down Broad Street. Now, I understand what he said about the unlikelihood of, maybe an extra crossing. I don't know quite how that sort of thing works, but as a cyclist and who has used this many, many times, you understand that that trail does go to Tampa. You can get on your bicycle right here in front of this building and ride to Tampa on your bicycle. And I think that that's a heck of an asset for this city. But right now, when you come in, you come across Garden Street on that flyover, and you come down the hill, and you cross, I don't know, whatever the little street is right there. And then you end up at the tail end of Canaveral Avenue, and at a house that's kind of about to fall in on itself, but has a yard full of kind of, dodgy-looking food bits for the stray cats, and the back end of Boggs Gases, which, like it's an industrial site, it's not that terrible, but a couple of other houses that are in kind of bad repair, and maybe a leftover warehouse-type metal structure or something like that. And then you make your way down a potholed street to Main Street, and then you turn left past a guy who seems to be collecting Cadillac Allantes. It was the one that was flown in from Italy. I don't know what his deal is with those. We got a yard full of them. And then you cross the railroad tracks, and then you get into downtown. I think it's embarrassing. And I think that if this project, this secret project, whatever it's going to be, were to allow yet another stipulation or exception, or whatever these things are called, I think that should be one of them, because I think the possibility to logically and aesthetically terminate that bike path into downtown Titusville needs to be maintained, because I'm going to quote from your own information here, the city should not approve vacations if they do not result in negative, should only approve vacations if they do not result in negative impacts on the current or future needs of the city's vehicular, bicycle, pedestrian circulation, or pedestrian circulation systems. A varied right, a vacated right-of-way cannot be reversed, and its loss is immediate and forever. That's all I've got to say about that.
Mr. Rice, do you have a comment on that?
I think the fact that it goes across Rinker's property and doing eminent domain and doing a flyover like you have in Garden Street to get over the railroad track, you can ask staff how much that costs to do the flyover. You're in eminent domain, you have to have appraisals, you have to buy the land, you just don't get it for free, okay? So, I mean, is it really cost effective to even think that that's a realistic possibility? That would be my 2 cents worth, just being hit sort of cold tonight with that topic.
Any other discussion? Anyone care to make a motion? Well, we've got a motion made. Any other discussion?
Did we get a second?
We got a second. Vice Chairman, Aton, yeah. Any other things you have to say? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Just for clarification, Member Faison seconded that.
Okay. Call the question.
Member Garad,
Yes?
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso. No. Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay, and does this come up before council next week? You know I was going to ask that question.
I should have been prepared.
Right here.
August 8th.
Okay.
And if we could, I think we got it from discussion, but as a general practice, when a member votes no on an item, we would like them at the end of the vote to just provide a brief reason why so that city council has that reason.
Sure. Yeah, I voted no because I also think that that property is very valuable to Titusville. Like he said, when you come off of that path, it really is embarrassing. It's actually scary to get on the path. I parked at Napa, and Broad Street. Napa is right here. Broad Street is here, and I had to park at Napa, which is private property, to get on it, and it's scary to get on right there. So I think this is very valuable property that I would like to see the city continue to maintain, and in hopes of one day expanding that bike path.
Okay, next item is comprehensive plan small scale amendment number 4, Whipple Street.
Hello,
You're not Brad Parrish.
No. Christy Anderson, Senior Planner. This is a comprehensive plan small-scale amendment, SSA number 4-2023. It's located at 3020 Whipple Street. The purpose of this land use amendment request and rezoning is to replace the conservation future land use category and open space and recreation zoning district on the property with residential 2 future land use and rural residential zoning. Currently, approximately 1.26 acres of the 3.35 acre property is currently designated as conservation future land use with open space recreation zoning. The applicant has provided a wetland survey showing that a very small percentage, approximately 0.05 acres, which is just over 2,000 square feet, of the conservation future land use and open space and recreation zoning area are wetlands, and is requesting that the ground truth information be utilized to replace the land use and zoning consistent with the comprehensive plan future land use element policy 1.16.2. The proposed amendment was found by staff that the intended change to the future land use designation of conservation in accordance with the future land use policy 1.16.2, the comprehensive plan future land use map amendment is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. And the rezoning is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan land development regulations, including the rezoning criteria described in section 34-40 of the code. The wetlands shown as conservation land use on the future land use map were established using the National Wetlands Inventory Map of 1988. These wetlands shown on this map have not been ground truth, and in order to provide more accurate mapping of wetlands, once a city receives a delineation on a specific site, the delineations will be accepted by the city of Titusville, and the future land use map will be amended accordingly. The current land use and zoning districts on the property will allow up to 4 residential units. The amendment will allow up to 6, resulting in a net increase of 2 additional residential units. The report analysis is based on the maximum build-out potential of 6 residential lots. However, the applicant has stated that the purpose is to construct a single-family residence on this site and does not intend to subdivide the property further. And the applicant has not provided a concept plan. Staff has offered a recommendation of approval for both the small-scale amendment and the rezoning. And if you have any questions for staff, I'd be happy to take them now.
Secretary Grant.
What's going to happen with the less than 1/10 of an acre of wetlands? Has that been discussed?
Well, the location of the existing wetlands lie against the rear property line of the property, which is outside of the buildable area.
Okay.
So impact to the wetlands is very unlikely. However, if there were any type of construction activity that would impact, that mitigation would be required. You know, state, city permits and things would be required to be obtained from St. John's.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other items? Mr. Faison.
Reading this again, it says that the current zoning allows for 4 residential uses. The proposed change will allow 6, but they only want to build 1 unit.
Correct. Just to restate that this report analysis was based on a maximum build out of 6. So.
Well, what I'm asking is why change if they only want to build 1 unit and currently they can't?
The reason is because the existing open space and recreation zoning is in the area where the pool is proposed. The applicant's proposing to build a single-family residence and a pool, and the open space and recreation, the current boundary of the zoning district bisects the property. And so this, by changing the zoning boundary, then the home and the pool could be constructed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Member Rogers.
I would have really loved to have known that about the pool, because I find that to be helpful information. I had the exact same question Mr. Faison did. If you're only going to build 1 house, you can build 4 houses. Why are you asking for the right to build 6 houses? And furthermore, looking at the flood zone designation, it seemed to me the last 2 houses are going to go in the water come next heavy rain. Can someone explain to me what the AE flood designation is? Like what exactly that means?
The AE is a special flood hazard zone that has a required base flood elevation. So when you build livable residence, you're required to build the livable floor area above that base flood elevation.
So that requires bringing in a lot of fill. It would, to raise the level of the ground.
It depends on the existing topography of the site. So.
But if there's, when you look at this picture on page, page is that 77. The encroaching blue to me is the water come next hurricane. So again, I don't see it. It's, you know, I'm sympathetic to a homeowner certainly who, you know, I know some of these plots or some of these wetlands designations, like nobody ever actually got on the property. They just kind of said, well, it should be about that there. And, you know, if somebody wants to put a pool in on a property they bought, you know, I think that's something that we should allow. I guess I'm just saying, I hate to think that we're enabling the placement of 2 extra houses in a low-lying area that will then require fill, and that's all. That's the only issue I've got with this.
Any
Chairman,
other discussion? Mr. Garrard?
in your report, you mentioned that you were relying on wetland and conservation areas delineated in a 1988 mapping that was using a best available methodology at the time, and that furthermore, and I've seen a couple of meetings already in my brief experience where the ground truthing occurs to show that the delineation was a bit vague, a little general, and more specific with the ground truthing that you've got more available land, and in order to build on it whatsoever, you have to change the land use. And just to kind of chime in with the flood potential, if the applicant's choosing to build the swimming pool, as much humor as it may seem, the swimming pool is not subject to the inclusion in a flood zone, it's, to my knowledge. The electrical mechanical equipment would have to be elevated. So you can see a pool could, quite frankly, be built subject to being inundated if somebody wanted their pool inundated without raising the pool. But in the same instance, the electrical mechanical equipment elevated above that would be probably little more than a stilt or a pole holding those devices up. You see that with air conditioners next to old homes in flood-prone areas very commonly. It's the same technique. So to kind of respond a little bit, you're probably not encroaching on the flood zone with a structure that would displace floodwaters and cause damage in another place. And those structures which would potentially do that are required to be elevated above that flood potential. So I think it kind of works to no net loss, no net gain.
Also, typically, if I can add, we also require compensatory storage when there are impacts of floodplains. So if any fill were required within an area that is currently a floodplain, then a equal amount of area would have to be excavated to allow for additional storage of stormwater elsewhere on the site.
Mr. Rogers?
So actually, this change is required for the placement of the pool. There's no other way around that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And the fact that this is in an area of critical concern, that does not have, Mr. Galindo, in your opinion, any impact on this decision?
Not to say that it won't have any impact, but just to explain what the area of critical concern is. It's the area where the city's wells are recharged, and so the city limits how much impervious surface can be built within the area of critical concern on individual lots. And so the typical limitation is 40%, although as you get closer to a well head where we pump the water, where the city pumps the water from, the restriction gets even more stringent. And so all of that is looked at during the engineering side of, which well radius it falls under, whether it's the 40% limitation or more restrictive. And so the crux of what the area of critical concern is trying to do is make sure that we have recharge in our aquifer recharge area.
Okay. Then the only other comment I have is that as an English teacher, I am grateful to the applicant for having taught me the word ground truthing.
Any other questions? Okay, at this point, we'll open the public hearing. Does the applicant want to speak?
Good evening. My name is Ashley Novander. I'm representing the applicant, Michael Stolars. So we ask that you approve the recommendation as provided. It is a de minimis impact given the abutting properties are all the same. We're asking for that rural residential for this parcel that matches the rest of the parcel, and the applicant is just asking to build a single-family residence. There is going to be no impact, no filling of the wetlands. Like you heard, they're just on that very edge of the western boundary there, well outside of the buildable area, and my clients are just looking to build their property here and have a single-family residence, and I ask that you approve it. So please let me know if you have any specific questions.
And there is only going to be one residence on that piece of property, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions? Member Faison.
Hi. Are you guys concerned about flooding? And I ask that question because there's a neighborhood that's been there for quite some time. Those are all older homes. And if that land was actually buildable for quite some time, it would have already been built upon. I've lived in this town for a long time, and I've gone around to neighborhood looking sometimes after heavy rains for vacant land to buy. And I'm not purchased in certain areas because I've seen it flood. And so my question is, are you guys okay with possibly building in an area that will flood?
Yeah, I think my clients are aware of the risk and are going to take any steps necessary in the concept plan to make it work. So I think we appreciate your concern. So
Mr. Rogers.
And the applicant is, I suppose this is directed as much as staff, at staff as anybody, but the applicant says that the applicant intends to build just one house there, but that certainly is not enforceable. It's just the intention at this time, right? It's once the house is built, it could be 6 houses once we do this.
That's correct. So your staff report is written to consider the maximum build-out potential of 6 units. The land as it currently sits could support 4 units. The applicant has stated that their interest is to only build 1 unit, but that is not binding.
Member Faison.
So Eddie, for you, maintaining that 40% impervious drainage for that area, would 6 homes possibly, or even 4 homes, exceed that 40% impervious?
Just based on what I've seen in other projects, I think it would be very unlikely to get 6 homes and the associated parking. And at that point, you'd probably need some additional stormwater management systems. And so I would find that very unlikely to be able to be built on this site.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
thanks.
Cards, please. Wait a minute, we have one. Mr. Prez.
Just one thought. I remember, too bad Mr. Rice isn't here, but I remember in a past life, he introduced a motion that included a condition of, and the condition being that it would not, I think it was window, as a matter of fact,
Yeah, it was.
that it would not build. But I think the issue was between parties within Windover, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Member Grodd.
I have a question for staff. The discussion concerns the potential. The potential would only be consummated if you went through the platting process to create the lots, and that process is subject to environmental review, stormwater management, drainage designs. You can't just sell property and build houses on meets and bounds descriptions as a subdivision of that particular property, can you?
That is correct. You would have to go through
So any
the
concerns
process.
everybody has about
Correct.
flooding and et cetera would all be subject to evaluation, recommendation, and correspondingly platting, which is pretty onerous and would probably expose all the problems and all their solutions. Otherwise, it's 1 lot, 1 house, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll open the public hearing.
Stan
Cards.
Johnston.
Stan Johnson, I'm here as a professional engineer, and I sent you an email some time ago, on that was July the 11th, that's not too long ago, and it's titled well, there's an inclusion that says City of Titusville outrageous misconduct and incompetence. Now, what does that have to do with this? It has to do with the comprehensive plan. I am not against this rezoning. I'm not, but I'm here to caution you about the comprehensive plan that has numerous errors, and I pointed out in this what I sent you, and just to go over that just a little bit briefly is it says dams, weirs, flood private property in violation of compensatory storage, which Mr. Galindo was speaking about. They just completely ignored compensatory storage. The city of Titusville did. The violations of the stormwater master plan, floodways outside of city limits require maintenance. City ignores it. Takes it out of the resiliency plan, sustainability, just completely ignores it. Number 4 I have is numbered AE 100-year flood zones with no calculations. It's nonsense, complete nonsense. We have flood zones in the city of Titusville that are absolute nonsense. They're not based on any calculations. And the city has lost all of this information. that it was established with the flood zone, which you're supposed to require to have. So also, it's, on the same sheet of paper, it talks about erroneous and out-of-date comprehensive plan regarding floodplains, city stormwater management plan, false reports, and the area of critical concern is far out of date, was established in about 1985. So this particular letter is especially talking about our city manager who has shown himself to be.
You need to stay on the subject. Don't talk about that.
Listen, this is the subject, Mr. Richardson.
No,
This
it's
is the
not.
subject. And when I'm talking about the comp plan, this is your duty.
The comp
This is your
plan-
duty, and
the
you
comp
need
plan
not be
is one
prejudiced
thing.
against.
When you start
Why
talking
don't you
about the
stop the
city
clock?
manager,
Stop the clock when you're doing this. All right, go ahead, listen
start
up.
talking about the city manager, you're getting away from the subject at hand. We're talking about this rezoning, this small-scale plan amendment. Nothing else. Don't vary from the subject.
Okay, can I mention about compensatory storage?
You did.
Okay, can I mention about
No,
that?
you didn't.
Okay, so you have a bunch of points. In other words, I can't use the word city manager in this. Are you out of your mind? I'll send this to you. This is prejudicial. This is the guy who met with me.
Get ready.
All right, this is the guy who met with me secretly
Did he
at a
discuss-
meeting. That's you. That's you.
And always,
And we discussed a number of these things with the comp plan. And now with this secret meeting, what do? You come against me. You've got a lot of things that are prejudicial against me. You do. That's not right. You're not doing what you're doing.
you finish,
You need to
I'm
serve the
gonna-
public.
are you through?
I could ask for another minute. I asked for another minute. I don't expect I'll get it. Thank you.
I want to make it clear to the council, to the commission, and everyone that wants to hear it. I met with Mr. Johnson over 5 years ago. It was an attempt to ask him to stop naming he was not the mayor at that time, Dan Diesel's mother-in-law in the flooding, in the Carroll Avenue flooding. I asked him to stop naming her at every council meeting. We met at Mama Rosa's, if you remember.
Yes, sir.
It was not a secret meeting. I will not tolerate that kind of stuff from him.
Well, you told me not to tell anybody.
That's false. Next card, please.
No more cards.
That's the end of the public hearing, and it comes back to the commission.
Applicant for rebuttal.
Do you want to rebut anything? No rebuttal. Okay. Mr. Faison.
All right, so I have one question and one comment. And so the first comment is, the reason why I'm asking about building homes in flooded areas is because of what happened over off of Barna and that Kirkwood area over there. It's terrible. When it rains heavy over Barna, it floods, and all those homes get flooded often. And so that's why I asked these questions, because that was swampland that they just built homes. So anyways, that's the reason why I asked that question. I understand that people are aware of what they're doing, but I want to ask, okay? Secondly, Eddie, so my question is back to the area of critical concern. Since we've talked often about how outdated it is, when is the city of Titusville going to renew or revise the area of critical concerns, or that mapping?
I don't have information on that timeline or that project. I
Okay.
know it's been discussed.
Okay, so the city is looking at updating or renovating or renewing that map source.
I have heard that, but I don't have an official timeline or expectations on that.
Thank you.
Secretary Grant,
I just want to make a motion.
go ahead.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the amendment and the rezoning as written.
Second.
Any discussion? Member Faison?
Nope.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Secretary Grant,
Yes, ma'am.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Member Muskosko,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. When is this item going to be heard?
This item will be heard by the City Council on Tuesday, August 8th.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next item, conditional use permit number 2-2023 Garden Street All-American Oil. I think this is your first time before P and Z, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
This is Josh.
So my name is Josh Mesnick.
Yeah.
I am one of the planners. I started about almost a year ago.
You've got a bunch of newbies tonight.
So, yeah. So Chelsea is currently handing out the updated conditional use permit for 2-2023 3580 Garden Street. It was just a revision for the staff recommendation at the end. So a little background information on the on CUP number 2-2023. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to reestablish a retail fuel sales use with new facilities at 3580 Garden Street. A CUP is required for additional storage or use of a regulated substance, gasoline, in the area of critical concern per section 394.4 of the Hazardous Materials Technical Manual. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Garden Street and Interstate 95 and is within the area of critical concern. The subject property contains approximately 2.04 acres and is currently developed as a vacant convenience store with gas pumps. The future land use designation on the property is commercial high intensity, and the property is zoned regional commercial. The underground fuel storage tanks are proposed outside of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection required 500-foot minimum setback from a well, and the city's required 750-foot minimum setback from a well per section 3.8.1 of the City Hazardous Materials Technical Manual. The proposed underground fuel storage and distribution system shall comply with Florida Administrative Code 62-761 underground storage tank systems, FFPA 30 Flammable and Combustible Liquids Code, NFPA 30A Code for Motor Fuel Dispensing Facilities, and all other applicable local, state, and federal regulations that apply to the intended facility use and operations. Also, a well field protection operating permit application is required to be approved by the Water Resources Department and Fire Department prior to receiving the certificate of occupancy and or occupation license. So the surrounding property information, surrounding uses, to the north is the north and west are the Brookshire subdivision. To the south is South Lake Elementary School and a vacant lot, and to the east is I-95. And on the other side of 95 is a hotel. So the staff analysis, the subject property is an unplatted parcel which contains approximately 2 acres. The site is currently developed as a gas station with convenience store, but is currently vacant. The applicant intends to demolish the existing development and construct new facilities according to the Brevard County Property Appraiser's Office data. The existing building was originally constructed in 1967. The future land use designation on the property is commercial high intensity, and the zoning on the property is regional commercial. The subject property is within the area of critical concern, however, it is outside of the 300 and 700-foot well radii, where more restrictive impervious surface area limitations apply. The tanks are also proposed to be located outside of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection required 500-foot setback and the city's required 750-foot setback per section 3.8.1 of the Hazardous Materials Technical Manual. The distance from the property boundary to the nearest active water supply wellhead is greater than 750 feet. The submitted concept plan proposes 2 fuel pump locations, 4 vehicle fuel pumps, and 2 truck fuel pumps. The conceptual site plan shows fuel storage to be located between the vehicle and truck fuel pumps. Hazardous Materials Technical Manual Section 3.9 requires that any non-residential activity that will store, handle, or use any regulated substance, including fuel, within the area of critical concern must obtain a well-field protection operating permit from the city prior to receiving a building certificate of occupancy or occupational license. Ordinance number 1986-42 requires obtaining a well-field operating protection operating permit for the storage, handling, or use of any toxic hazardous materials in excess of 16 pounds of any dry material or 2 gallons of wet chemical on site. This standard was subsequently increased to 25 pounds and 5 gallons. The ordinance also requires that well-field protection operating permits shall be renewed annually. So the conditional use criteria, Section 34-76 of the LDRs state that before any conditional use is granted, City Council shall apply the standards set forth below and shall determine the satisfactory provisions and arrangements of the following factors have been met by the petitioner or were applicable. The following are staff's findings based on the CUP request.
Let me stop you at this point. You've got a really long memo to read, and you shouldn't have been asked to read this whole thing. We got this. Did we all have a chance to read it? I'm relieving you of that responsibility. Yes. And Eddie's going to buy you something from the food truck tomorrow. Any questions of the staff in regard to this? Member Rogers was first.
I see that there seem to be some sort of regulations for 300 feet, 500 feet, 750 feet, and, you know, these tanks are that far from a wellhead anyway. I was unclear about the 1,500 foot mark, whether there was a wellhead within that. Maybe I misread something, but we do have wells over in that area, right? And if so, how far are they?
Well, it is. It is.
The nearest active well was across 95. Josh, correct me if I'm mistaken, but when we were measuring the distance, it was across 95, so it's outside of any of the well radii.
Okay.
Member Faison.
Mr. Grott was first. What? Okay.
No, I'm going by the lights.
I apologize. So we're here tonight only to discuss whether or not we're going to approve or disapprove the conditional use permit. Is that correct? Because there are some other concerns here outside of that. And one of those big concerns was, remember Garrett here was speaking last time about the traffic and the turn in and turn out of Brookshire just to the west of this area. And in this proposed project has a truck pumping fueling station. So I don't know what size those trucks are, but the turn in and turn out, there's a traffic concern that I have here. But again, I know this outside of what this request is for, but it's just something that I definitely want to be aware of later on if it comes up, because that area has changed from when this was originally built. It's no longer the same by who's already moved in, and so to allow this new thing to come in on something that was old because it's grandfathered in per se. There's more to talk about here than just the conditional use permit, and I think that needs to be part of the conversation. Brookshire, the new traffic that's already generated there, and that stuff. So I don't know how we can bring that in because I know it's not part of today, but it needs to be part of the conversation.
Sure, and just to make it clear for all of the commissioners, the conditional use permit being required tonight is for storage of a regulated substance, in this case fuel, within the area of critical concern. This is just allowing the use, and if there's any conditions that are needed to mitigate the impacts of storage of a hazardous material in the ACC, the engineering side of things as far as transportation, turn in, turn out, things like that is all considered during the site plan phase by our reviewing departments.
Thank you, Eddie.
Member Gilbert.
Yeah, I was wondering how far away from the South Lake School that is. And if, because it says it's reestablishing a retail fuel sales, was the school there when they did have the fuel going, or was that built after and now they're trying to reestablish it?
As a longtime member of this community, there used to be a functioning gas station across the street from the school.
And that was built in 1967,
Yeah.
as I recall. It's somewhere in the document here.
They have coexisted together
Yeah.
in the past for a long time.
Okay, so I'm just concerned about hazardous chemicals and things like that close to the school, and also, you know, the type of vehicles that'll be coming in and out that might affect, you know, the children that are walking to the school. So I just wanted to state my concerns.
Member Garrard.
For staff, a couple of questions. Excuse me. I'm not familiar with the approval of the project, which if you look at the illustration, the aerial photograph on page 102 or 140, I can use that as a reference point. And so there's a developing residential community to the north. There's a parcel of land that's identified in the backup material that's separating those platted lots and shown on the photographs on page 140, 102 out of 140. Is that owned by the development? Is that adjacent to the development? Is that a separate ownership? I couldn't find any information on that.
I was going to look up the plat for Brookshire on the property appraiser's website, but they seem to be having some challenges with their website lately.
I did find that to be also the case. And that brings my question is that in the case of this conditional use for the additional storage of hazardous material, is that inclusive of the diesel fuel that's going to be utilized for the fueling stops for the semi-tractor trailers that are illustrated in the conceptual plan that we have a copy of?
I believe one of the tanks is dedicated to diesel, but we can have the applicant explain more if that's.
But that would be part of the conditional use. It's expanding that hazardous material storage for that purpose.
I don't know that it's necessarily expanding, but it is for that storage of the material underground in the ACC.
Maybe perhaps I should use the word, is it intensifying the current or pre-existing development that was fuel sales with a convenience store? Now it's diesel truck refueling sales in addition to the expansion of the fuel services. Is this an intensification of the old development that was there heretofore?
I would have to rely on the applicant to explain that. However, I will say that we don't have records of the size of the tanks or the intensity of the use that was previously constructed.
Certainly, I'll ask that. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
I just was on page 86, the 3941032. I understand that these tanks are supposed to be double-walled tanks, which I guess is standard, and there's monitoring and there's saline solution that's between the inner tank and the outer tank, and it's all electronically monitored. And I'm sure that there is an absolute forest of regulations on this, and that's a good thing. But since Florida is basically a giant sponge, I see that it says the staff recommends a condition of approval if the applicant submit the following with the site plan application: details on any concrete liner used as a secondary containment. Is a concrete liner around this double-walled tank in the ground going to be required, or can it be required? And is that something that's in the plans right now?
I can speak from experience from the last time we had a similar request. The engineer described that since these tanks are double walled, they provide that secondary containment. A concrete vault, if you will, in the ground that then the tank is lowered into tends to act as a basin that would hold storm water that then the tank would be sitting in water, whereas the way they're designed in the ground is the water percolates and doesn't.
It just goes past them. Yeah, I did wonder about that. Like, how do they get the water out that comes in from the top? Okay, and could I just ask, Mr. Galindo, I mean, how common are modern gas storage tank failures in Florida? I mean, you do hear about gas getting into the water supply occasionally, but it seems like sometimes.
I have not heard of a case, at least in Titusville, where gas has leaked into the water supply.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll hear the applicant first, open the public hearing.
Go to a lot of P&Z meetings, and I am on a couple of P&Z boards. I know that the questions always, grow when you see something and you wonder what it is. So I think what we really have here is an opportunity to get an eyesore out of the city of Titusville. I mean, we have a closed gas station that's functioned since they've owned it. Beyond that, it was operating, it had diesel. It's pretty much fallen into disrepair. The previous operator passed away, and they could not release it to anybody because of the condition of the store. So now it's time to knock it down and build a nice new store. The location is perfect. It's on 95 in a major roadway. It's already, like I said before, it's already had gas and diesel, but now everything's going to be upgraded and be brand new. And we have a plan that was prepared by a professional engineer that specializes in hazardous materials, because we know we're in the well field protection area. Even though we are outside the 750 feet, we are still within the critical concern area. So we have to prepare this report to show you how, if by some remote chance we have some kind of a spill or an issue. So we provided the report that shows the types of tanks we're going to put in, the types of piping we're going to put in, the types of monitoring we're going to put in, everything that needs to be there to make sure that the spill doesn't happen. And if it does, what happens next? The plan is put in place of what happens should it ever occur. Obviously, that's probably something that's very concerning. I haven't heard of one in a long time. I know back when they used to have single wall tanks, and the state finally came through and said no more of that because there was a lot of it. Now that they do dual walls, they use different materials that don't rust over time and have holes in them. The concrete pads are put in for buoyancy. They're not, if you do a concrete container, that's above ground, so if you have a spill, it contains the spill. But if you put them below ground, you put a concrete slab so that the tank doesn't float up when it's empty, because the uplift will pull it out of the ground. So they put it on a concrete slab underneath the ground. That's why you see a concrete slab on the plans. But so, basically we're here for the conditional use because we are in the area of critical concern, and it makes it a gas station as a conditional use because of that in this location, even though it's already been there. The plan is to, it's not to build a truck stop. It's a gas station that will accommodate a truck a lot better than it did before. Should a truck pull in, back in the past, a truck would pull in, probably had a pretty hard time getting in and out because it was small, it wasn't built for that. This way, we're going to build it to accommodate a semi if it does come in, but that's not what we're building. We're not building a truck stop. We're building a gas station with a convenience store that will accommodate an occasional semi should one come in. With all the new truck stops up and down 95, the chances of trucks even coming here are probably pretty remote. You've got the Flying J, you've got the Loves, you've got a lot of nice new truck stops all along 95 that they know, the truckers know where to go. They're going to go to Buc-ee's, or they're going to go to, Flying J. They know where to stop because they're going to get everything they need in one stop. They're not going to stop at a station that doesn't really accommodate truckers. So that's not what we're proposing here. So I hope that alleviates a lot of your concerns. We will be upgrading the access to meet current DOT requirements. If you look at it now, you've got two accesses that don't even meet separation requirements. They don't meet turning radiuses. They don't meet anything. So we'll be improving that to make sure that the traffic flows a lot better. We'll be putting in drainage systems, all the stuff that we do for all these site plans to bring them into compliance with the current code. So it'll be a vast improvement than what you have there now. So the first step is to come before you guys and get approval for the conditional use. The owners and operators are here. They operate, what did you say, 30-something stores in this area. They plan to operate this location here. So they have a lot of experience doing this. They have a lot of stores that they currently do it for. If there's any questions I can't answer, they're here to answer those for you. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I think we concur with all staff's recommendations. We hope that you agree that since they recommended approval, that you would approve this as well.
Member Rogers.
There will be two tanks on this site?
Well, we haven't done the actual design, but we do have the report from the, so whatever tanks you need for the different types of grades of fuel will
Yes.
be put on the site.
Oh, okay. So it's not just one tank of gas and one tank of diesel, it's multiple grades and multiple, but there will be a diesel tank, but it's not just that you've got, 50% gas and 50% diesel.
Right. If you want.
Please state your name and address.
My name is Rasa. I'm the owner of All American Oil. And your question is there going to be two tanks. One is 15,000 and another one is also 15,000, but diesel is going to be only 6,000 gallon. So it's going to be compartment in the tank. So regular, premium and diesel. And regular and premium will blend and it will become the plus unleaded. So we're going to have 3 products of gasoline and 1 product is diesel.
Thank you.
And which is, we are not going to cater the semi truck or anything because it won't have that kind of access. Like it's going to be F-150 diesel truck and those kind of trucks going to come. Local residential Ford trucks or GM trucks or something like that.
Member Garad.
A few questions for the applicant, maybe, and your representative, the engineer. I was trying to get my hands around that you're going to build an unsuccessful diesel fueling station because these other stations are going to take all the business away, and it goes back to my question. In the conditional use, you're expanding the previous convenience store and its gasoline storage facilities by increasing the storage capacity. Is that the conditional use, or any underground storage redevelopment of this would require conditional use? I'm not clear on that. First, that question, and then for you guys on the technical side.
Sure. So the existing station is not in operation, has not been in operation. So to establish the use at this site, because the use will require underground storage of fuel in the area of critical concern, that's the requirement for CUP.
So to the extent a nonconformity exists, this is a redevelopment of the site to circumstantially deal with those matters of nonconformity and to bring it to conformity. That's what we're reviewing.
Any CUP that is inactive for 6 months will require a new CUP, so you can look at it with that lens.
That helps me focus on this. So in the proposal, what I noticed, and my question to staff, was compatibility of adjacent land uses. The way you've drawn your sketch, you've used the turning movements for semi-tractor trailers. You see them enter the site, fuel, then leave the site, which is in proximity but for a short buffer zone and some vegetation from a residential community. So the question I have for you is, have you considered the compatibility in this design you've put forth? Not that this is a site plan, but it is a conceptual drawing that you've illustrated. And how did you address that semi-tractor trailers coming off 95 are going to enter the site, making a right turn movement illustrated in your plan, but they're going to go all the way around the building, making the noise that semi-tractor trailers make when they accelerate through the site to exit the site, and then they're going to turn left against traffic. I believe that's a 2-lane section of Garden Street, and then they're going to re-enter the traffic grid, which assumes they're probably going north or south, not going west. So how you see that working, compatibility with the adjacent land use, the turning movements coming in and out of this, and this development of a semi-tractor trailer facility or diesel fueling facility for multiple diesel vehicles as opposed to just gasoline sales?
Okay.
Passenger vehicles.
Sure. And I guess I'll repeat myself. This is not a truck stop. This is being developed so that an occasional truck that may come in, a semi that might come in, if ever, can actually negotiate the site. We can't just create a site where there's no way for a truck to get in there and get out if they do come in, whether it be a semi-truck, a fire truck, you name it, whatever truck that we have to accommodate that might visit the site has to be able to get out. So if a truck comes here because they didn't stop at Love's or they didn't stop at Flying J, which they probably will, an occasional truck would be able to come in here and fuel and leave. the majority, what the owner was speaking of, is they want to capture trucks like mine, a 2,500 diesel Chevrolet Silverado, you know, the Ford diesels, the work trucks. They're not gearing this for semis. Even though it can accommodate a semi, it's not geared for semis. It's geared for the occasional semi that will come in to fuel should they ever come in. But that's not what we're trying to design here.
So it goes back to my question, not about the size of your truck or my trailer towed behind a truck. The illustration pretty clearly shows that the idea is to service semi-tractor trailers, and on an interstate transportation network, it would be a natural whether or not Love's is more expensive. So I'm just going with your plan to show what appears to be a desire to have that type of vehicle, whether routinely or occasionally. It still looks at this incompatible land use, and I don't know that you answered my question about have you done anything to address the potential conflict caused by this noise generated by oversized commercial vehicles as opposed to residential, non-commercial vehicles like your F-250 or my 3500 dually.
Yeah.
Have any consideration that been made in this design?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we're designing for what's going to happen 99% of the time. The property to, and I don't know what's exactly, I don't know if there's something new being developed to the north of us, but there's a wetland there, so I don't know what's being developed to the north.
That was my question for staff about land. I couldn't determine the ownership of the same
So
property.
the wetland wraps around the west end of the property and the north end of the property. So we have a big wetland buffer between us and the next available developable piece of property. That's a lot of wetlands there that somebody would have to fill in to be able to come close enough to us to be affected by any traffic or noise or anything like that. And from what I've experienced in the city of Titusville, it's almost impossible to develop in a wetland, so I can't imagine that happening. So we are, and if you look at our plan, let me pull that up here real quick. We are fairly far away from our boundary line. We are not building all the way up to the property line. You can see how that wetland wraps around to the west and to the north, and then that's all wetlands. So we shouldn't have anybody anywhere near us, even in the future.
I would just add that when you look at the interstate systems, you see noise buffers installed to reduce the noise caused by these vehicles on roads like that in your residential communities.
60,000 trips a day.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting wetlands don't offer a noise buffer from a residential neighborhood, and I would still beg the question's answer. What is the ownership and land use designated for the adjacent property to your north and west? It just concerns me that's
There usually is.
but I'll leave that question open.
Is it
Thank you
on
for
the
your answer.
report what the adjacent land uses are?
According to the future land use map on page 104 of 40, the tract R, which is the property that wraps around the subject property, is part of the Brookshire subdivision and is in the high-density residential future land use designation. It appears to be a preservation tract or a wetland tract.
I thank you for that. That adds credence to what the wetlands are ownership other than your own, and they're in the ownership of the development adjacent to it.
Yeah. I can't pass around my tablet, but if you can see that blue around our red square, that's all wetlands.
Any other questions? I just have one regarding screening and buffering. On the backside of this piece of property, will you put in trees and shrubs like is on Country Club between Barna and Hopkins, that development, where there's large trees and all kinds of screening and buffering?
I mean, whatever the buffering requirements are required between commercial and residential, we would.
And
we
I
would
want
have
to
do that
see
in the site
green
plan.
buffers,
Green buffers, not just walls or
not
anything.
fences
Gotcha, okay,
in that area.
okay.
Any other questions? Member Faison.
Not so much of a question, more of a statement. Your response oftentimes today have been that you're going to do what's required. And a lot of times, us up here and you being part of a P&Z board yourself, you also are very interested in making sure that the constituents or the residents of your town that you represent get the best that they can get. So you try to strike a happy medium between what's required and what is best for your community. And that's all we're trying to do here today.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Member Grimes.
I have one more question, and it goes back. This came before us and then was withdrawn. Is my memory correct on that? And this is coming back a second time?
I don't believe it was
Postponed?
I don't believe it was heard by the commission, but it was originally on an agenda and then we had to pull it from the agenda so we can get additional information.
I understand. And what that brings my question to is when I went out to the site and looked at it last time, and that ownership question I had was there at the same point, it appears there's an older, what must have been a billboard on Garden Street at one time, and I couldn't determine whether that was on this property. I don't believe it is. It's not illustrated on their documents, or on that tract of land that's between their property and the developing residential neighborhood that's on that aerial photograph. You can actually see it if you are looking at a ground view of the area, kind of poles stick up, and I wondered if it was on the applicant's property.
It is.
And are you going to remove that on development?
Yes.
And you're willing to do that as a condition of your approval? You remove
Yeah,
the
you don't
billboard?
have an active lease on it, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the lease is not active, yeah.
Thank you. You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any cards?
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnston, I'm not speaking against it, I'm just, I'm wondering what's going on with the conditional use permit. And I'm thinking, what if you have a conditional use permit to build a house, and you build your house there and you live in it for 5 years or so, and then it's vacant for 6 months? Does that mean that you've lost your conditional use permit? I think the legal staff said 6 months, when you don't use your CUP, you lose it. Is that correct?
It does for this particular use.
Wow. I'm afraid to have a conditional use in the city of Titusville, and if it's vacant for 6 months, then I lose it, and I can't sell it. Can't live in the house again because maybe somebody says, I don't want it there anymore. I don't think that's fair. I think that right now is what you guys are doing is misusing your power of a conditional use permit when you have a 6 months expiration date. I think that's nonsense. What did I say? I think that's nonsense. I'm sure it's nonsense, absolute nonsense. So I don't appreciate what you guys are doing because that certainly doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Any other cards, Lori?
No, sir.
Okay. They come back, the public hearing is closed, and it'll come back to the commission. Any more comments to staff or anyone care to make a motion? I see a lot of blank looks.
You know, again, I know that today we're only here to discuss the conditional use permit of allowing fuel back onto that site. That's our only talking point for tonight. However, it is the furtherance of that I have the issue with. I don't have the issue with the fuel on the land, but once it's there, it turns into a gas station, and now we have other issues to contend with. So it's really hard for me to say yes to this or even vote on this, knowing that I'm saying yes to something that I'd say no to later on.
Member Grant, you had your light lit.
Well, I was going to recommend approval.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve CUP number 2-2023. You need more?
With the conditions or?
There were no conditions, were there?
There was a condition that a well field protection operating permit is approved for Section 3.9 hazardous and toxic material requirements. in the
Conditions
NCC.
as written now.
With the addition of green,
Buffering?
Buffering in the back.
I didn't say that.
I did. Is there a second to the motion? Member Garrett.
I'll make a second with the stipulation, as representatives have said, that they'll remove the prior existing billboard, vacate it from the site. And I think we had some language to support your idea of buffering to be examined with vegetation as a principal theory, I guess, as development site plans come to staff in the future.
And the maker of the motion agrees with that.
Yes, he does.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison?
No.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. And Member Faison, do you want to state something for the record?
Yeah, so my objection to this is not the gas station in itself, but it's in what it's going to cause down the road, now that there is a subdivision, Brookshire, just to the west of it. I think this is going to cause more of a headache long-term than the problem that it's choosing to solve. Not only that, there's already a gas station just to the east on the other side of 95. So there's not a burning desire for the city of Titusville that needs another gas station on that junction of 95 and Garden Street, not to cause more traffic problems in that area.
And this will be heard at council meeting on the
This will be heard Tuesday, August 8th, City Council.
next Tuesday. Thank you. Next item, comprehensive plan small scale amendment 3-2023 Evermore.
So this item will be advertised and rescheduled to the August 16th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Okay. No action is needed at this time.
No, sir.
We go back to plan unit development minimum living area standards.
Real quickly, so they've postponed that. What they come here for? They're not going to talk about it tonight. Okay.
Chairman, if I could just summarize real quick, I believe the item PD minimum living area standards was brought up by Member Rogers, alternate Member Rogers, with interest after the discussion about accessory dwelling units, about potentially reducing the minimum living area when proposing a plan development PD. Currently, the Planning and Zoning Commission has not requested advisability from City Council. The process for making recommendations to Council is to typically the Commission will ask Council for advisability. Are you interested in pursuing this topic? And then Council will tell you yes, and in what way they'd like you to discuss, and typically give you a time frame like ADUs. You received a request to come back in 6 months. So if you want to just generally discuss to see if there's any interest in pursuing this further, and then I believe the next appropriate step would be to ask Council for advisability to continue discussing this item.
Member Rogers, since you started this whole conversation.
I was going to say, I think should always follow to its final conclusion any of Member Rogers' clever ideas. I just, looking at the list, to me, the easy thing to do is to drop the minimums on each one of these categories by 100, so that the tiny houses go down to 250 square feet minimum and the single families go down to 800 square feet minimum. And I just think that economically and on a lot of levels, and even people's, I think, tastes are changing a little bit. We're headed for smaller dwelling units. And I think Titusville, could get out in front of that trend. Plus, nobody can afford a home anymore. Everybody knows that.
Secretary Grant.
Mr. Rogers, I'm trying to understand what's the value added in reducing the minimums. Help me out here if you don't mind.
I just
But I
think that,
can't see, personally, I don't see anything wrong with the current ones, but explain to me what you think.
I was really zeroing in more on the tiny houses, which, you know, I think 250 as a minimum for a tiny house is you can't really have a 350 square foot tiny house, or it's hard to anyway. It's got to have different levels and stuff.
Well, we have a tiny house ordinance, I believe. Could we just have that included in that ordinance if you wanted to talk specifically
Certainly,
about the tiny homes?
I think it came up actually for me with the. I was kind of thinking on the Dairy Road luxury apartments because I was trying to think of a way to have them cut down fewer trees. That as a sweetener to the developer, maybe, you know, he said that the apartments were going to be some 600 square foot apartments, and I was just thinking, you know, maybe if he would reduce the footprint, maybe, you know, let him do 500 square foot apartments. And then I was told that that wasn't how such things are done. But I just do. I mean, obviously, the market is going to dictate whether people will accept a 500 square foot apartment or a 700 square foot condo. But I just think that anything that you can do to get the cost down right now is a plus, because nobody can afford housing anymore. I mean, that's pretty well established. And so I think, you know, if you allow a smaller size, then more people can get housing.
Okay.
Any other, Member Faison?
Yeah, when it comes to this particular topic, I understand that you may want to reduce the home sizes to make things more advantageous to those who are already making money. But I don't want to squeeze people like sardines into a can. You know, so I think that what we have right now is great. I wasn't here last meeting, but I did attend over the thing. I watch you guys on YouTube, and it was awesome to see the work that you guys put in. So I think you guys have done a great job with these sizes. I think this is awesome. I think it's a 900 square foot starter home for a small family is great. I think 350 for a tiny house is good. That's a 25 by 10. I'm sorry, 35 by 10. You know what I mean? That's not too big. So I just want to let you guys know that I appreciate the work that you've put in, and I agree with the numbers that you've come up with.
These are existing numbers.
Say what?
These are existing numbers. Any other discussion? Does the commission want to consider this and then address it at a later meeting, or what do you want to do with this item?
I'm happy with it.
Vice Chairman Aton.
So I understand, I think what Eddie said was, we're basically saying, do we want to advance this to council to get their recommendation, whether we bring it back or not? And I would say, I don't think this rises to the level.
Okay. Member Faison.
I'm gonna stand down.
So does the commission agree to keep things as it is now and not send us to council for advisability?
Need a motion?
If you want to make a motion?
I don't know that we need a motion, but consensus.
Yeah.
Sure.
The consensus is to just leave it as is.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
If I just may say one thing on the way out, then, you know, as a single teacher, renting, well, I mean, I don't have to do this. I'm trying to save money, but renting a room in an otherwise occupied house, I just want to tell you that what people want, I think, is they don't have to have a They don't have to have a McMansion, and they don't even have to have a kind of bungalow or like a little, it doesn't have to be some cute little starter home. I just think they want some dignified option that they can call their own, where they can go home, close the door, take a bath, feel safe, cook a meal. And, you know, if it's got, you know, bunk beds for 2 kids, you know, or something, then they'll feel at least like they're, you know, I don't know, and they're paying for it, they own it. I think that they'll feel a little better about, I don't know, life in general. I think a lot of people right now are living in substandard situations simply because they cannot afford what is on offer in the housing market, and I think that that may get worse. And I think, to me, the low-hanging fruit is change the size. Anyway, I respect everyone's, you know, feeling that they don't need to change this, but that's where I'm coming from.
Lord, do we have any cards on this?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So,
Hey, look at the other card.
I apologize. Yes, Stan Johnston.
I pass.
thank you. Okay, so the consensus is to just leave it alone for now and not take it to council. We'll be lucky if we get our last one before council. Okay. Petitions and requests from the public and press.
Stan Johnston, a registered professional engineer, and for 28 years I've been a surveyor too. But my license is not active right now as a surveyor. And I sent you an email, which it's titled, I'll read the title to you, SNJ Oaks. I believe that SNJ Oaks is the very worst approved plan that I have ever seen in my life. Please correct survey, plans, and preliminary plat. And right, I'm not gonna go into some other things, but the email has this attachment. Markup, red line sheets. It's just like blood red all over it. Those are 40 items of problems with this survey, but I'm going to just go into the survey problems. Right here, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right here, this is the 6th right here. There's another one. I've done 6 posters on this project. Notice this one says fake survey. Fake survey is what I wrote was done in an affidavit saying that it was a fake survey, and I have no comments back. Anybody disagreeing with it? It was a recorded affidavit that I did. So let me give you an example. Just about 2 weeks ago, I had the city vice mayor, Mr. Robinson, went with me out to the site. Finally got somebody to visit it, and so we're looking at the right of way. Right of way goes like this way. So here's a corner. And here's a corner that disagrees with it. About 4 feet difference. So they can't both be right. Maybe they're both wrong. But if I take from this corner and measure over 50 feet, I'm in the sidewalk on the other side of the street. So what we have in this particular survey is we have, very clearly, we have a boundary dispute with the city of Titusville. We have a boundary dispute with the city of Titusville, and the city does what? Ignores it. And here's what I've done. I've gone to planning department, I've gone to public works, community development, council, city manager. They're all closed except for public works. Public works is a surveyor. Surveyor has not been asked to go out and take a look at it. I think it should take more than 5 minutes to say it's wrong. So in other words, we've been going on since February of last year. That's about 18 months. And the city of Titusville does what? Nothing, ignores it. Ignores it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm here to answer your questions, and what I'm asking you to do is to look into the matter, the surveying matter. You've got a surveyor, just ask the surveyor to go out and look at it. Don't prevent it from having it. So the city manager this is nonsense and negligence on the part of the city of Titusville. Nonsense and negligence. It's unbelievable. I have a very hard time. How can anyone believe this is happening?
Okay, any other?
I have a question for him.
Yeah.
Well, you get so many more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Say it again,
You
please.
catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So you have a question that you pose to the city about this boundary dispute. So my question to you is, what do you want the city to do about this boundary dispute?
Well, as a I know, in this, let me show you what it is. So you see these little circles on there? These are survey monuments that I have found. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 of them on here. None of them are shown on the survey. None of them. So if we look at what the surveyor done, Mr. Snow has done, he's got about 4 feet here and 2 feet there. And so what we have, this is the right of way. This is the 50-foot right of way I'm representing here. 2 foot here and 4 foot here. And what you have is a boundary dispute. It's cattywampus, and it's a boundary dispute with the city of Titusville right of way. I can't imagine the city doing nothing about it.
Well, no, I understand what you're saying, but my question to you is, what is the solution that you want to see done?
Well, I think someone should say, look, why doesn't the city look into this instead of completely ignoring? So what I'm having closed doors again about everybody, including everybody except Public Works. And Public Works says, hey, we got a surveyor, but we've got to be instructed to say, hey, take a look at it.
Okay, so, gotcha. Eddie, can you write down? Can somebody look into it? Eddie, listen, one more time. Can you just write down? Can someone look into it?
I can tell you that Brad Parrish, our Community Development Director, has met with Stan to discuss this item.
Perfect. All right, so Stan, someone is looking into it. So the solution that you asked for is being done.
I don't think so. I met with
That's not, no. You asked someone to look into it. He said Mr. Parrish is looking into it. So your solution that you asked for, the solution you asked for is being done. I think that's fair, right? That's fair.
It's been almost 18 months. Thank you. All right. That's a try.
Yeah, I also had the same question as Member Faison. I think we all know the definition of insanity, and you coming up week after week, but also us listening to it week after week also feels insane that we're all sitting here not knowing what's happening. So I would also, I'm glad to know that Brad Parrish is looking into it because I think that's really important. But I'd hope that we would get a response soon. If it's as simple as, now this is way out of my element, but if it's as simple as getting a surveyor out to the property, I would like to see that done because I think that would close one of these tabs that you have and we can move on to something else. So I thank you for bringing up to the attention of the council and the city. And I would also like to know, as just a citizen of the city, is this survey correct as well? Is it not? And then we can move on and find a solution forward.
Well, Brad Parrish met with me and he said that the survey's wrong and it's still not done. Pardon?
Not only did somebody look into it, but you also received an answer.
Well, they're not doing anything about it that I know of.
I can't help that you don't like the answer.
That's
Stan.
back in March.
Can't help that you don't like the answer.
Pardon?
Can't help that you don't like the answer. So not only did he look into it for you, he also gave you an answer.
Yeah, but okay, so okay, let's go ahead and build it and have a wrong survey, and that's what's being done right now. So I think that's nonsense and negligence by the city of Titusville. All these lots, every one of these lots is wrong, and they're constructing it right now.
Stan, I've got a question. As has been said, we all sit here and listen to you every week about how unhappy the city of Titusville makes you. I just wonder, have you ever considered relocating?
Well, I've been here for 50 years. I got 5 generations of my family, 5 generations of my wife's family. I've been employed by the city of Titusville for many years. I was at the top of the salary and as an engineer, and a surveyor, employed by the city of Titusville. No, what I'm thinking right now is that there's a lot of people in here that are just covered with nonsense and negligence on this matter. It's just crazy. I think you guys are crazy to ignore this thing. It's been ignored for about 18 months now. You're crazy.
As a follow-up question.
Yeah. Yes, I'm angry about it.
As a follow-up question, do you have any hobbies other than this?
Well, I swam yesterday. I swam 3 miles at the Y.
Okay. I just was thinking maybe another hobby would be, may help you relax a little.
Well,
make you feel
this is my job. This is my job, my profession. And I've spent my life with it, and I intend to continue it at 77 years old.
Well, I was kind of thinking maybe.
Pardon? Well,
building
thank you
models.
for offering that. I've got grandchildren, too.
Any other comments from the public?
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tim Ferrucci. I live at 572 Gardenia Avenue. I moved about like a month ago, and I just wanted to, the bike path conversation. So I rode my bike here using that path, and I think that's probably one of my favorite features of this town is just something that can get me over here without a car and without getting me into the road for most of the way, at least. So I just think that expanding that and protecting that is vital to this town and a real draw for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to answer some questions anyone may have, there was a grant to build the bike path. The grant ended at the railroad tracks, right? That's what I've been told.
I believe that's the case.
From the railroad track to where it goes up over to Garden Street, we didn't get grant money for that. And I've taken Jolynn Nelson out there several times on the corner of Canaveral Avenue and showed her how it looks. And we cleaned it up a couple times. But that's the problem, is that portion over the railroad tracks to where it begins, we didn't receive grant money for that.
And just wanted to share that the city has a longer term vision for the trails and being able to cycle throughout the city. So that portion that we've been describing tonight is the regional portion of the trail, but we conducted a multimodal transportation study that analyzed how we can connect the local network to that regional trail system so that you could bike throughout the city. And we have several priority projects to enhance cyclist ability to navigate throughout the city.
That's awesome.
Member, yeah.
He doesn't want to say my last name.
Member M.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I appreciate it. And I think just because the grant ended, is it possible for us to apply for another grant in the future? I mean, I know that you just said we had a plan, and so I'd love to see that. But I think that that was one of the beautiful parts about living over in Orlando, the bike trails. I mean, the Cross Seminole Trail goes 41 miles, and I would do that on the weekend, and I loved it. And so I love that our citizens are using that trail. And so thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no one else.
Well, I did actually decide. I just want to say that I do think that if you're not a cyclist, you don't really quite understand how this feels. But this is I completely agree with what the gentleman said. This is it's a wonderful asset that Titusville has, and I would sure love to see it not kind of peter out into a kind of a cracked street, in the back. In the back end of, I don't know, it's crummy. You know how it looks. I'd rather have it kind of land triumphantly, at the water, like our spacecraft used to do.
Okay, staff reports.
No report from me. I don't know if the other staff members have anything exciting to report.
This is the biggest staff at a P&Z meeting I've seen in years.
We
And
tried to get Brad
applaud
to
you.
come too.
What do you say?
We tried to get Brad to come too.
Yeah, he's the only one missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they're all here.
So Brad buys you everything in the food truck, since you're all here. Okay, city attorney.
Yes, thank you. I sent an email out. Hopefully you all read it. I did get a response from the majority of you all on my request for your response to participate in a voluntary, not required training opportunity that I've identified through my continuing legal education sources that is specific to the Live Local Act. And the webinar that we've purchased has 3 different sessions, and I watched it to see how the timing broke down. And the first one is entitled Affordable Housing in Florida and the Live Local Act. That one runs for about 90 minutes, so I think it would make sense, kind of based on the poll and the timing of these sessions, to have 2, part 1 and a part 2 of this 3-hour adventure. The first one, of course, will be that session I just described, 90 minutes. The second one will combine number 2 and number 3. The second one being affordable housing development as it related to House Bill 1339. And then the third and final presentation is provided by the Florida Housing Finance Organization. I'm not sure exactly what that final acronym letter is, but that's what we'll do. As long as everyone here agrees, you, again, don't have to participate. It's completely voluntary. The way we will run this presentation is as a workshop. And so that means that we will comply with the Florida Sunshine Law by posting that it is a workshop for the Planning and Zoning Commission. We will take no action at the workshop. A quorum is required for members for the meeting to take place. And so I will expect that after going forward with the planning, that we will have at least 4 members present to be able to go forward. The notice and the minutes will be kept, and the location will be here in council chambers. And so what I propose is that we pick 2 days before upcoming commission meetings, starting at 4 o'clock, running until 5:30, and then having a break, and then starting the regular meeting up at 6 o'clock at a regular time. I see your chairman shaking his head yes, and I don't see any objection from anybody. I see Mr. Grant shaking his head no. Would you like to chime in?
No, just a tick.
Okay. Okay, so having, laid all of that framework out, the upcoming dates for this commission that I propose to have part 1 would be the next meeting, August 16th at 4 o'clock. And then we are not going to have a meeting for several weeks because that first week of September, the meeting's canceled. So the next meeting after that won't be until September 20th. So you're looking at a month in between those 2 sessions, which I think is fine, but I just want to run it by you. The alternative to that would be doing it September 20th and October 4th, and or incorporating August 30th, which is a day that there will be no meetings, and going from like 3:30 to 5 in here, and then not having a meeting afterwards. So I would open it up to all of you all to comment on what days you are available and ready to commit to attending a workshop training opportunity.
Well, I think as you proposed it, as we discussed it by text or email, is fine, as long as we don't have a lengthy agenda on that night. Because sometimes we're here till 10 or 11 o'clock. If we start at 4, it's going to be pretty tiresome, as long as the agenda is not loaded for that night. And as I understand it, we're missing the first meeting in September because of the planning conference y'all are going to, right? Yes. Okay. Member Faison, he beat you to.
I would propose that we have it on a day that we don't have a meeting. That way we can come in at 5, and then 3 hours later at 8, we can go home.
Well, this room is used by other.
So if we were to do it on a day that we don't have a meeting, I don't know that I could commit staff to a Wednesday night after hours, but we could do it during the end of the afternoon of the workday, if that's something that members wanted to participate in. Like I had suggested, we could have done one of the 2 sessions on August 30th, which is a Wednesday where there are no meetings, but I would propose starting at 3:30 and going until 5 with a 90-minute session if we were going to use that date. just an idea. If we wanted to do the full 3 hours, I would do it from 2 to 5 on that date.
I'll take the day off.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Mine was kind of in conjunction with that, but I guess it's not going to work, is one of the meetings that was not going to happen. Could we just do it in place of it?
So the first week of September, the meeting is also scheduled to be changed because of the city council budget hearing schedule. So if staff was here, we would have had that September 6th meeting on the 7th. So this room is reserved for the first meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on Thursday, September 7th. So should you wish to use that date, that is also up for discussion. It's not going to be a Wednesday, though, because of the budget for city council.
Member Garrett.
I was just going to suggest that my preference would follow that it would be a separate meeting. We'd come in at 3 and leave at 5. Or else they need to cater the meeting that we start at 5:30 and get over it.
They did
10
that one
o'clock at
time.
night, because nobody's going to get dinner. Just a food for thought, but that would be my 2 bits worth of it.
Agenda for next meeting?
I don't have it, but it's not as packed as, we had more items tonight than I would expect to have on the next agenda.
So here's what I propose. I suggest that we do the first workshop at the next meeting date, the August 16th. It runs for 90 minutes. We start at 4 o'clock for the workshop on the 16th, and it goes until 5:30, and then we have a regular meeting. And then at the end of that meeting, we can discuss when we want to do part 2.
Does everybody agree to that?
And if anybody didn't make it to the session between 4 and 5:30 for the next meeting, then we can also talk about an alternative one-day session to have all 3 hours, if that would be better for anyone who is not able to make it at 4 o'clock on August 16th. But for now, I kind of hear a consensus that that's something that we can do. We'll get this ball rolling. We will open up the room at 4 o'clock on August 16th. Can I get a show of hands of how many people are willing to commit to that? 1, 2, up and down hands, okay. 1, 2, 3,
you've
4,
got
5,
one
6.
hand
I get
behind
all
you.
of you. All of you, almost all of you. Okay, great.
Member Childs.
So that'll be 4 until 5:30 with the regular meeting starting at 6. So you'll have a break to get a bite to eat at Burger King or chat amongst yourselves.
If it's not torn down by then.
All right, so that's the plan. Thank you all. Appreciate
Okay.
your time.
Chairperson has no report. Any members report? Secretary Grant.
You guys notice any pushback from the, what you call it, Live Local Act?
Live
Live
Local.
Local Act? Reading an article from Indian Harbor Beach here a couple of weeks ago, and people were saying how they realize that, what this is all about, but the citizens don't seem to have any say-so. There's a lot of, they were complaining about short-term rentals and how they're invading their neighborhoods. And funny, a couple of days ago, I read an article from Melbourne Beach with the same thing. I got a feeling it's moving this way as well. The fun is just beginning. That's where I really miss not being at last meeting, because I really want to talk about it. I really want to talk about that before we voted on the ADUs, because a lot of people, some people are using their ADUs as their primary and renting out their homes to Airbnbs, and it's causing a lot of, some pushback in some neighborhoods, and I suspect we're going to see a lot more of that, because we're making everybody landlords.
And home rule has dissolved.
Yeah.
With this legislature. Any other reports? Member M.
Thank you. So I would like, if it's possible, to discuss possibly moving petitions and requests to earlier in the agenda, if that's something you guys would consider. I know that as I've sat there, it's nice to listen to all the different projects, but when you come for a certain thing you would like to speak about, it's nice to be able to get it done and then leave after that. I think we're the only commission that has it later on. So I just like to put that out there and see what everyone else thought. There might be a reason why it's at the end. I'm new, so I'm not sure. But
It's been at the end of the agenda for at least, I can't remember if it was at the end of the agenda when I was first on P and Z back in the 80s. But for the last 10 years, it's been at the end of the agenda. Chelsea, would you check on that and see?
It's in the bylaws. So if, in order to change where it sits in the order, it would require an amendment to the bylaws, which is within this body's discretion. If you wish to make an amendment to the bylaws, I believe the procedure is to request to put it on the next agenda in order to discuss that change at the next meeting.
Okay, Member Garrett?
As a comment from my past experience, one of the dilemmas you have for professional representation during these public hearings, it's sometimes a pretty high ticket price for the professional engineers, landscape architects, attorneys at law. And when you put the petitions first and you don't have a limit on who and how many petitioners can appear, the clock runs on the client's dime. And so oftentimes you find governments wanting to push the petitions to the end so that those people who have been paid for their services can leave as opposed to sitting and waiting to be heard. My 2 bits for what it's worth.
Member Rogers?
I just was going to say I think it sounds like a good idea to move it to the beginning.
If we have a lengthy agenda, one where in the last year or two this room has been packed, they tend to want to speak about the things at that point, if it's petitions and requests from the public at the beginning. Then you'll hear it again as the item comes up. I think we can talk about it, but it does have its benefits to being at the end of the agenda, even though the public really doesn't have a say before the agenda, if that makes any sense. We can discuss it. If you want to put it on the next agenda for us to discuss, as long as the agenda is not lengthy.
Member Moscoso, you can go ahead and make a motion to include this item on the next agenda.
sure, let's see if I can do this. Okay, so I make a motion to put this amendment? I'm not sure. Can you help me with the wording?
To propose a amendment to the bylaws in regards to the timing of petitions and requests. I think that would cover it.
Member
that
Perez.
wording. Thank you.
And Member Perez seconded. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garad?
I have to say no.
Secretary Grant?
I don't understand. I'm gonna say no, because I really don't understand yet.
Member Faison?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
No.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
It's 3-3.
You be the man.
And I vote no, but we'll discuss it at a later time. Okay, anything else? This meeting is adjourned.